Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, the big news is Phoenix 1.8.0 RC was released. So we've talked about several of the PRs that were merged along the way, but now it's all together into something you can download and try out for yourself. This is a lot of really cool stuff. Some of it, like the DaisyUI styled Tailwind components, we've already talked about that. That's in this release. It's part of the generators. And it includes the plug dark mode feature. So along with this, there's an announcement blog post. We've got a link to that. And in that blog post, there are some little videos embedded that show off some of these different features. So if you're like wondering, what does some of this mean? Go check out the blog post. It has a lot more detail, has code, and it has some of those videos that you can see. So then the other one is the magic link / passwordless authentication by default. So when you do Phoenix Gen Auth, you're now getting passwordless authentication. Previously, that's something I had to put in after the fact and, be very careful and very concerned. Am I getting this right? Am I messing up anything? Because it's just a different flow. So it's super great that this is included, but I also saw a new require sudo mode plug. And we've talked about that idea of sudo mode in the web browser. And that's this whole idea of when you're needing to perform some sensitive operation and there's been a passage of time since they've authenticated, it enforces recent authentication to be able to access something. So that was a surprise to me. That was like just a nice little benefit. I think the biggest thing in this release is this new idea of scopes. And this is scopes for data access and authorization. And it's like billed as a new first-class pattern in Phoenix. And it's designed to make secure data access the default, not something that you have to remember or frequently forget. Because the point they're making is the most common OWASP vulnerability is broken access control, which means the website's working, but you're able to access data you're not supposed to be able to reach.
Yeah, basically the code that you wrote is the most broken.
Yes.
Just to step back for a second, like DaisyUI is probably going to be the biggest like visual impact.
Yes,
because core components is like so used, and I'm gonna guess that if you're trying to keep up with all the conventions that the generators, and by the generators, I should clarify, there is the installer where it'll like start a new Phoenix project. That's where a lot of this will come in. True. But then there's the ongoing generators, like you've got an existing app and you're adding something to it. There is a difference here. The installer, I guess, is going to have the most changes here. But for the sudo mode and things like that, like that's Phoenix Gen Auth, and that is technically a generator, as well. Sudo mode, authentication, authorization, right? So Gen Auth could mean two things. Generally, you kind of have to like differentiate that. There's authentication, which is what Gen Auth has typically taken care of for you, email and password to begin with, but now defaulting to passwordless via magic links. And by magic links, we mean emails that are sent to you, like one-time codes. And now also sudo mode, which is that, like you said, more recent, sensitive, re-up on your authentication kind of thing. I've had to do all of these on my own. Sudo mode is also called like step up authorization, or sudo mode is like a very computery term. GitHub uses that one, I think. It's just like a super user kind of mode, right? Like just to make sure, like, are you really sure you want to do this? The idea here is that your cookie might have gotten hijacked somehow, which would be difficult to do anyway. But if it did get hijacked, then at least they wouldn't be able to perform the sensitive actions because they would have to have the password, or the authentication method to like do the sudo mode things, which is things like taking over your account, changing the email or changing the password. Back to scopes here. Scopes. Okay, so, where do I begin?
Well, what I gotta say is, when I talk about like this is the biggest change, this is like for me on the level of introducing the idea of contexts. Like there's this new level of the way we think about how we access data and what goes in these modules. That's what scopes feels like to me. I don't know. What about you, David?
Yes, it's going to definitely change the way things feel in all request cycles, I think. Right? You've already probably have like a pattern for this somewhere. This is conventionalizing it. This is saying, give me all of the required context that travels along with this the resource, and the most common resource out there is gonna be the user, the currently logged in user. But there's lots of situations out there. It's like, oh, well, they're currently looking at this account though. So we need that account's context in there as well. Or they don't have sudo mode turned on. So like you need that kind of flag carried in, along with it. Like that's part of the scope. Or you could even say like for this API interaction, they are trying to submit, change this ID of this other resource. And so that resource scope needs to be kind of put in there as well, like the currently viewed resource is in there. Like it all kind of depends on what you're doing, how you've styled these things. All right, this is the biggest like code architectural impact part here is like what that usually results in. This was a huge problem in React is property drilling, right? So something way up at the top, which in our case would be like the request is being made, the controller action, for example, or these plugs way up there. That needs to carry that user and all that scope along with it all the way down to the deepest, darkest depths of your code, right? And probably the worst place that it ends up that I've seen is in change sets, right? All the way down to like just doing any change. And one of the common patterns you might see is like an audit log of like who's performing the action, right? And so you have that current scope of the current user, right? And generally that's as far as we think is the current user. So we don't remember to put all of the other things or leave room for the other things on there. So we might end up putting a bunch of virtual fields on this user and then attaching all this other junk to this user that may or may not be there, and depending on like the call path for this thing. And then it ends up being in the change set, which will emit other side effects to like create audit log records or something along with the actual update record of the resource you're trying to change. So scopes, what can they do for you? Like they can do a lot for you, and it's going to be a very important pattern, I think, going forward. And I'm glad that they're setting a precedence here because it is a difficult thing to get right. And I think they're not reaching too far into like your app. This is just to recap like a little bit of what they're actually doing here. Like any config about scopes with Phoenix is mostly about the generators. It's not actually like, it's not the framework calling your code. Let me be clear about that. It's setting up a pattern for you to be able to extend from at that point, but it's still your code that deals with the scope that you're setting in there.
Which for me comes right back to how contexts was introduced, right? It's a generator and it's like, here's a new pattern and we're going to set you up for it. You can customize it and own it from there.
Right. This would be very important for things like multi-tenancy kind of apps. This would be important for, and I'm kind of curious how they would recommend it. I should go chat with some folks, but like a lot of times an app will have like the front ends that users would face, but then you have the back office. And so the scope of that back office would be different, right? Right. So you need to kind of do something different when you're in the back office. And maybe you do the sudo mode to get into the back office. Or how do you handle impersonation? Oh, well now your scope actually includes two users at this point, right? The user that the app, the real app, kind of thinks it's acting under, and doing typical authorization for that. But then there's going to be some cases where like, well, I am impersonating and I need some extra like links to the back office or something, or extra debug information or something like that that I might be rendering in the app only when I'm impersonating because I'm a staff user, right? Or an admin user. Anyway, as you can tell, I'm very excited. I'm very excited about this default scope, and I've been like combing the guide. By the way, there's a new guide for scopes to kind of walk you through it. So I've been combing the guide and like comparing notes. I mean, like, okay, this is what I did. Okay, I took care of this part, and like I did it differently this way. I like theirs better. So I'm sure a lot of like veteran Phoenix users are probably going to be looking at this with great interest. And I'm very happy that new projects going forward with Phoenix is going to have what I'm judging to be a very healthy pattern to start with, which is very helpful. I'm pretty excited about this. And it can extend to even more. It's not all about the glorious con, as con as in the connection, the plug connection. It could be about your absinthe context. It could be about setting up fixtures for, in factories or something like that, or other like helper functions, just in test. Like there really is a lot that you can kind of do here. Anyway, very interesting, definitely worth diving into and spending more than just a couple minutes looking at the guides here. Like you should really assess how this could be adopted in your code base.
Yeah, because I think of some of the other libraries I've seen that help handle multi-tenancy. One of the approaches that I've seen used is that when you establish which tenant this is, that data gets put into the process dictionary, so that ends up traveling down into those deeper levels. So you're not having to like push it all the way down through every call. Then it's like, well, when you spawn a task, you have to copy over this context, and it's just like this. I want to see, because they even specifically mentioned that this could be used for multi-tenancy. That's what I want to see. I want to see how this can be a more elegant solution where everything's a little bit more in your face in terms of the code. You're not having to debug and say, oh, what might be in the process dictionary at this point? I love that idea. So I am really looking forward to playing with this.
Yeah. Ooh, very exciting.
Today's episode is sponsored by Paraxial.io. Every day, hackers search the internet for vulnerable applications aiming to steal sensitive data, commit fraud, and spitefully ruin the weekend of a hardworking developer. Paraxial.io is the first and only security platform with full Elixir support that stops these attacks. Developers love the Elixir native protection. Management loves Paraxial.io's metrics that detail the security accomplishments of engineering, which are required for SOC 2, ISO, and HIPAA compliance. Sign in for a free trial of Paraxial.io today and mention Thinking Elixir when you schedule a demo for a limited time offer. Check it out at Paraxial.io.
All right, next up, there was an interesting kind of privacy or security focused PR that was merged into Ecto. Hat tip to Noah Benson, by the way. Thanks for listening and giving those tips. So we got a link to the PRs and some posts on Blue Sky about it. But here's the thing: it's Ecto, right? There is a way in Ecto by default to redact a bunch of fields, right? It's on the field macro. So you define your field and you can say redact true. And what that tells all of the implementations of like the logger and or JSON or all these kinds of things is to basically say, don't log this field, it's got sensitive info. Mm-hmm. But what if the whole struct is sensitive? or what if you just don't want any of that kind of stuff logged and you're afraid of your team like adding fields, virtual or not, like just adding to it and then forgetting to add redact true on there, You could write your own little use myapp.schema that like does some of the macro listing and give me all the things, right? You could do that. Or now in Ecto main, at least, we'll wait for the release, but in Ecto main, now you can also set a module attribute of schema redact all except primary keys. Primary keys, I guess, aren't sensitive, right?
Yeah, I was looking at the PR and it looks like, from my reading of it, where you might have a schema that has foreign keys, that those primary keys might be one of those things that's not redacted. So how this particular schema is connected to other related schemas is still there, which is helpful. But like the actual data on all of these is totally, redacted for logs. And I think of this approach like, if I had an integrations table where my service might integrate into other services and the user is able to put in, we have system generated API keys that they have to have. It's a shared secret. The user might be putting in other data that might be part of that integration for them, but it's user controlled data. Like I just wanted to redact all of that just to be safe. And then because, if I do add any more fields in the future, just block it all, right? That's one of those situations where, everything in this schema, we're just going to treat as sensitive just to be safe. That's a great addition.
Yeah. And easy too, like just an easy setting, easy in the implementation as well. So I was glad to see it upstream up there. Yeah, so we got a link to the posts on Blue Sky, so you can kind of see the history of this too. It's just kind of thrown out as a question. It ended up as a PR and merged into Ecto. It's one of those typical, like, hey man, if we just talk, things can happen. so feel free to have those conversations out in the wild. Don't keep them up in your head or privately. Like it's okay to talk out loud about those things. Good things can happen from that.
And next up, the Elixir Secure Coding Training, or ESCT.
The ESC.
ESC, yes. Well, that project is really, we had to bring it up again because it's a great community resource and it has recently found a new home for maintainership. The project, it's Elixir Secure Coding Training. It's a GitHub repo, an interactive cybersecurity curriculum designed for enterprise use at software companies using Elixir. It was actually developed at Podium. You know, I've been at companies where you have to regularly take security training, right? That's just part of like SOC 2 compliance, just that our developers are getting security training. But our small Elixir team was part of a larger company, and most of the company was doing Java. And so our security training was Java based, which, you know, was dumb because, you know, one, we don't know. They're like saying, which of these functions should you be using in this contest for this particular business app? It's like, you tell me the answer because I don't even know the code.
The string formatter one, obviously, I don't know. the voided class one, I think. Yeah, that's the one.
And so really what was silly about that is it would check the box that, yes, they've received training, but it didn't actually do any good, right? It wasn't in any way raising security awareness for the Elixir developers. What this project does is it is something that you fork and you can customize for your particular company. And so I just wanted to make sure people were aware of this. So what it is, TvLabs has taken over the maintainership of the project, and the long-term plan is to move this to the EEF, where they will hold the repo because it's such a fantastic community resource. If you haven't seen that before and at your company you have Elixir being used, this is a security resource you should be checking out.
All right, next up, we saw a cool tip shared online. We just wanted to pass it along. If you, in your environment, export the environment variable visual equals, and then, you know, a pointer to the binary of your editor of choice, like VS Code, for example, or NeoVim, then you can do a cool trick in an IEX shell. On the Mac, at least, you can hit Escape O, and it's going to escape out into your visual editor, I guess, right? And so that way, if you're doing a lot of like multi-line commands in the IEX terminal, like you can do that in your terminal of choice. I often, like, I don't know, probably 7 times out of 10, I will screw up the command and then like have to IEX break lines or something to get out of it, or just forget where my the ending brackets are. I just get it wrong. So I just have to start like spamming in right brackets or right parentheses to make it screw up. So in other words, you know, Escape O is a nifty little trick to get out of the IEX shell just temporarily and into your editor of choice, write the IEX, you know, commands, the Elixir code of choice. And then when you save and quit out of that, IEX will have that command in its line then. So that's pretty cool. Another way that you can kind of take that tip is if like, I'm not really sure what I need to type. Well, we've got, and by we, I mean, generally the developer, you know, community at large has LLM support out there now, right? So you can kind of set that visual editor to be like Cursor, for example, and then ask Cursor questions on how do I get this to be JSON decoded or, you know, whatever. And it's gonna help you out with a little bit of that. So it's just a way to get out of the IEX terminal and anywhere to where you need to be. And then when you're done with that, all of that code gets put back into the IEX buffer, which is pretty great. Nice, cool tip. Loved it. We got a link to the original post of that tip. So you go give a hat tip to them. Generally, for these kinds of hot tips, maybe go subscribe or listen to the hashtag Elixir Lang tag there on Blue Sky. There's a lot of that kind of stuff online.
Mm-hmm. And next up, speaking of Cursor, if you are using Cursor or another code editor that supports MCP servers, so MCP is like all the new hotness. It was a protocol that was defined by Anthropic. It's all around large language models. Actually, OpenAI officially adopted support for it too. What this is some of these code editors support MCP servers, and that stands for Model Context Protocol. Well, Daniel Holzgen created a new MCP server that you can add that brings package repository awareness for HexPM, NPM, Ruby gems, and more. So I've got a link to it in the show notes. But what this means is that you can be working with Cursor and say, install the latest XYZ package. And it will be able to find out by querying the package repository, what is the latest version, and then be able to update your mix.exs file, dropping in the package with the right version. In the show notes, I have included a link and a little blurb of what does this config look like? Because when you go into Cursor and you say, look at my settings for MCP servers, it's just a JSON blob and there's nothing in it. And so you have to know what to put in it. So I got a little blurb of what that looks like for this particular one. So anyway, there's going to be lots of these kinds of things. More of them are going to be coming. MCP servers built into your editors. So anyway, just want to pass that one along specifically because of the great Hex support.
Yeah. All right, last up, conference news. ElixirConf US 2025 is now open for submitting talks and workshops. You're going to find some more information at elixirconf.com. We have also got a Twitter post that talks a little bit more about it. So ElixirConf US 2025 will be in Orlando one last time, I think. The last time because they signed a multi-year contract there, but Orlando is also a pretty fun place for a bunch of theme parks out there. So I'm particularly excited about Super Mario World. I'm a kid of the late 80s, early 90s, so I'm not going to be able to avoid that place. I will force my kids to go along with me and have fun. Well, enough about that. Anyway, you can submit a talk by April 29th or a workshop by April 15th. Any of the topics of Phoenix, LiveView, or other kinds of distributed systems is always going to be good. And you can join the wait list for pre-sale of the tickets now on that. So that's elixirconf.com. So one more time, they're taking talks. If you got an idea, go propose a talk. They got some really fun things out there in the past. So very excited to see what comes up. ElixirConf US is going to be on August 27th for the workshops and August 28th and 29th in Orlando and virtual. So you'll find that there.
And that's it for the news. Today we're being joined by our special guest, Krzysztof Nalepa. Krzysztof, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm excited you could join us because you work at Software Mansion and you and your team or whoever's involved, which I want to learn more about, have built LiveDebugger. And we've talked about it on the news. I love this tool. I use this tool. This is an incredible tool that lets you, if you haven't seen it yet, dear listener, you need to go try it out immediately. This is a thing that lets you see the state of what's going on inside your LiveView in a local development environment. It's incredible. So I'm really happy to be able to talk with you more about this, learn more of the story and how we can really take advantage of it. But before we get into all of that, I'd love to hear more about you. Like, where do you live and what kind of work are you doing?
Yes, so hi, my name is Krzysztof. I live in Poland, Krakow, and I'm working as a software engineer in Software Mansion. I've been working mostly with Elixir, especially focused on web applications. And yeah, that's me.
I am curious to hear about how long have you been working with Elixir?
It's actually not that long because I've been working as a software engineer for like 4 years. I actually started with Java during my college education. I did a lot of stuff in Spring Framework and I was hoping to become a Java developer. Fortunately, this didn't happen and I haven't written any line of code in Java professionally. So
I think it's great when the things that we really want don't happen and we don't know that it's actually better for us at the time.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm really happy that I ended here. I started like working 4 years ago. And I started with React. I switched basically to front end. Then I switched back to backend stuff. I was introduced to Erlang. I was actually working on instant messaging server. It's called Mongoose IM. It's open source. I think it's maintained by Erlang Solutions. And after that, I landed in Elixir world, and I've been working with Elixir for like 3.5 years. Mostly with LiveView, actually. Yeah, that's it.
Can you tell me a little bit about what Software Mansion does? Because I've seen that name several times now, just in Elixir News. From what I remember, Software Mansion does a lot with like video web streaming. Can you give me a fuller picture there of what Software Mansion's doing?
Originally, Software Mansion was focused on React Native, and it was like a main technology for us. But right now, we are doing a lot of different stuff. We have a big focus on media technologies, and there are like plenty products that we develop. Probably the biggest one is Membrane, probably main media library for Elixir. To be honest, I'm not that familiar with it because I mostly focus on the web stuff, and the media department in our company is quite big, and I sit next to them, so and that's basically it.
But otherwise, Software Mansion is also a software consultancy. So as
that's right. That's right. We are mostly focused on clients, and our products are more for advertisement.
Maybe you can give us an intro to LiveDebugger. Big picture, what is this project? And then I would love to understand what caused you or the team to actually say, this is something we want to invest in making. But first, like, start off with, what is this? How do I use it?
Like in one sentence, LiveDebugger is a tool designed to simplify the debugging process of applications written in Phoenix LiveView. And how to use it? It's basically a hex package that you add as a dependency to your project. And after you run your project, it will automatically start a new application. And by application, I mean the OTP application, which will start a separate Phoenix endpoint on a different port with its own router that hosts our custom views that are actually written in LiveView. So LiveDebugger is written completely in LiveView. And after you access the port of LiveDebugger, you will get access to plenty of features that will help you to understand what's happening in your application. It will allow you to inspect states of each live view and live component. It will allow you to see the transitions of these states. Also, it will allow you to see the components tree of currently displayed live view. Yeah, much more basically. But yeah, these are main features of LiveDebugger. It allows you to understand what's happening in your app.
Yeah, I'll say personally, when I first started using it, I jumped into an existing project that had been developed by a number of different people over time. And it was a very complex live view application. Complex in meaning you're having dynamic live components are being loaded in under different contexts. And I'm trying to jump into this project and just get my bearings of what is going on with this thing. What component am I looking at right now? And LiveDebugger was awesome. I just open it up, and as I'm clicking around and I click this in the live view, and boom, here's the component that comes up. It's just made obvious in the tree. And then I'm able to see what the state is of that live component or the live view. And then as I click around in the application and the state is changing, I'm seeing those events just happening. This handle event was fired, and this is the state change before and after. And one of the things I love, I just gotta say, I love this, is if you've ever done an IO inspect on your state, the socket or something like that. It's just huge, and it's unusable in that the default is to shorten it, right? So that it doesn't completely blow out your whole console scroll back. Everything gets shrunk down. It's well, that's the piece of data I wanted. Okay, I need to do an IO inspect on this deeper part of the assigns and something like that. And what I love is that in the LiveDebugger, it's all available. It might be collapsed as a tree, but I can click and expand, and none of it's been, redacted or shrunken, or all the data's there. Yay! This is awesome. I love that. So yeah, I think people should be using this. Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned there, it's just a dev only package. You can just add it to your mix file, and say dev only. So there's no concern about this going anywhere else. Super easy to add, and then it runs on a separate port, so you can just open it up alongside your application. Yeah, so I guess my next question is, what was the driver for creating this? Is this inspired by a tool from a different community, or is this just we're having a difficult time figuring out what's going on? What was the driver for this?
So first of all, I'm really glad that it helps you. That was the goal of this project, to help people. When it comes to reasons, I think these two are combined in case of this project. So when I joined Software Mansion, it was a year ago, I started working on a rather big client project. which use LiveView and some other Elixir technologies like Ash framework. And it was quite a big application, quite complex, with a lot of interactions between live components. And actually, what's more, the team who was responsible for creating this application was learning LiveView during the development. So some of code was over-engineered and over-complicated. For example, they were not using live components, which caused LiveViews to be extremely big, and their state was enormous. This is the situation I was like 1 year ago, and I was trying to understand this application, and it was extremely hard for me because every time I wanted to like see what's happening in the state, I had to like use dbg, and it landed in the sea of logs, and it was almost impossible to find it. It was literally like looking for a needle in a haystack. But somehow I managed it. I mean, I could like turn off logs, and that was okay for some time. That was basically a situation where like refactoring the code, making it more easy to work with. And one time I was chatting with my teammate, and he was like completely new to the LiveView world. He originates from the React actually, and he mentioned that he misses React DevTools sometimes in this project. And you know, I have some experience with React, and I was using React DevTools, and I was like, wow, this is a great idea. Maybe we should do it. That's how it started. That was the main inspiration. We had basically a problem and idea for a solution for this problem, and decided to research it. So I took some my research and development hours, started working on POC. I found some libraries that was doing something similar for LiveView applications. One of them is probably time travel, which was abandoned by author like 3 years ago, I think. And it was really cool. It uses Chrome extension, and it does similar stuff to LiveDebugger. Actually, their tracing functionality is completely different to ours. But nevertheless, I started to like tinker and created a POC that was really simple. It was an increment button, and when you clicked it, the trace was appearing, and you could see the state of the LiveView. So yeah, this is how it started.
That's pretty incredible. It reminds me a little bit of, you know, back in the day, Phoenix used to not annotate its HTML.
Right.
And so if you had a bunch of like templates that even were recursive, right, could even render itself with just how far it needed to go. And you needed to debug some sort of like, I don't know, something was floating right instead of left. You needed to figure out, where is this coming from? What template is this coming from? And it was really difficult. You had to almost like just grab some random classes in some element somewhere and grep your code base for those random classes and hope that they were only used in that one little template. And by classes, I mean HTML classes, right? That would usually get you to where you needed to go. You surely can't just grep for div. That would be everything. But then since then, they added annotations to the Heeks tag engine, and now it's really easy to see. You know, when you're in the browser trying to debug something that's displaying, you know, weirdly, you can see exactly which template it's coming from. I've seen some other debuggers in it, and it doesn't pollute like the actual HTML, like what you're seeing, you know, with like a bunch of notes or something to where you can't even like see what you're doing anymore. So speaking of that, did you consider using a Chrome extension to like facilitate some of the LiveDebugger things on the client side? Because it's, as far as I understand, it is all server side handled, right?
Yeah, so Chrome extension is coming in next version of LiveDebugger. It's already written. I mean, for now, it's quite simple. So basically, we got a lot of feedback after release of the first version that people would like to have LiveDebugger in the same browser or the same card of browser that their project with their project. So we decided to like create a Chrome extension, so you will be actually able to run DevTools application from DevTools, and there will be a new card there with LiveDebugger. So we'll be actually able to open it in the DevTools extension. And yes, we are planning to extend this extension. There will be more features associated with components highlighting and other stuff. So definitely we'll go this way.
Yeah. So what is the Chrome extension like enabling for you? What does that give you, like on top of just normal, HTML, another frame or something, for example?
Actually, in like JavaScript Word, you can inspect elements in application. So you can right click on something and click inspect, and it will show you the HTML that is associated with this element in the browser.
Gotcha.
So we want to do something similar like this to this, and basically we hope that somehow you will be able to, not somehow, but with the extension, you will be able to right click in your application and it will show you a live component that generated this piece of code.
The idea would be using the browser integration, be able to right click on an element in a page and drive into the LiveView debugger from that direction, as opposed to the LiveView debugger being a separate thing and having to drill down from the top to get down into it.
That's right.
That's cool.
That's right.
Yeah, that's pretty slick. And so you mentioned the time travel bit too. So you can kind of like scroll back in history to see what the assigns were, at a moment. That's killer. But yeah, you're hooking into like standard tracing, I guess, to figure out like what's on the assigns, and then to print that out, in the app. I'm guessing you're just using standard like inspect protocol kind of things, and so
usually that's true. So when it comes to tracing, we are using like the dbg module. It's Erlang module. After that, we are inspecting the Erlang terms to like display it to the user.
So I have in my head how I think this works, and I'd love to hear if this is right, and maybe you can describe further how this is actually doing it. But from what I gather and think, I have this live view of the debugger, and because it's running in the same instance of my application, it has access to everything. And it is finding the live views. It has a list of the live views I could join to. And then it's doing like a get state on that process to get like, what is the entire state of what's going on in that process? And then being able to represent and display that in a way that's navigatable. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, that's true. This is what's happening. So there is like this view containing all active live views in a node. So we do some discovery there, and we basically gather information about active live views. And after that, when we have the PID of the live view process, we can do everything with it. I mean, this is a process. We can ask for its state. We can trace functions, which is that are executed by this process. So yeah, that's it.
I think that's so cool. That's a feature that's built into the Beam, which is this debug ability to say, get the entire state. And I think, if I'm right, I think there's a way to put an entire state. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true.
Because then you have this list of, these are the actions that have happened in this sequence of interactions on this live view. You could say time travel by go back and reset the state of the live view to this previous state. Is that something that's possible?
I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be possible. I mean, as far as I know, and as far as I played around with it, it's totally possible, and you can do whatever you want with this state. I mean, it's just a process.
That's like that whole time travel idea, right? That I've seen in the React Dev tools too, where you can go back to a previous state. Because like if you're trying to recreate a bug state, that can be very difficult to get it just right. So for some bugs, that can be really nasty like that. So being able to like just step back and put the live view back into that previous state where I can see the bug and see what, go back and forth, and that would just be insane.
Well, it's coming, not in the next version, but in the future. We are planning to do something like this in the future. And as I said, I was playing around with it. I think I've got somewhere a POC. So yeah, it's possible and it will happen.
Well, before we talk about some of the other cool stuff you have planned, and I just want to make sure we cover how this should or should not be used, right?
Mm-hmm.
As I understand it, this is really should only be a dev local tool, right? No one should say, oh, let me deploy this to my server. Or is that something that you think people could do? You know, how should people be using this?
I really discourage using LiveDebugger on production. It wasn't meant to be a production library. For now, it should be used purely for local development, and I want to make sure that it's clear. So we haven't considered what consequences it can have in terms of security, basically, when you use LiveDebugger on production. As you could see, you can easily see all active live views for a given node. So probably you could see what exactly user is doing. For now, it'd be a dev-only dependency.
Yep.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I can't even imagine like normal debugger tracers being in production. You know, that's always like a tension point too, right? Is even without LiveDebugger, just trying to do it the old school way with like Redbug or something or Recon. It's always like, oh, I don't really want to include this dependency in here at all because then it can happen. But on the other hand, I'm going to need it when I need it, you know, in production, perhaps, hopefully not. There's usually like 3 or 4 things I try before doing it live in prod, but trying to at least replicate, you know, whatever the bug is in the staging or local environment, you know, first, copying, you know, data over to try to replicate, but rather than on the actual, you know, prod stuff.
Glad we got that out of the way, though. Like people need to have a realistic expectation of how you can safely use this and what it's intended for.
I'm just curious, I guess. It has no effect on like the usability of this, perhaps, but there's not a lot that I'm aware of. There's not a lot of Phoenix or Mix packages out there that hook in so much into like asset pipelines or other like web asset kind of things. And I'm curious from your perspective, OpenWeb is one of them, right? OpenWeb has like its own router and it needs to, you forward routes over to it. LiveDebugger is going to be kind of the same thing, but you guys have your own server on top of that. How has it been to like develop a Hex package that has its own like asset pipeline and its own server that starts up, you know, alongside? Like, did you find that to be difficult or obtuse or lots of little gotchas in there that just made that experience like kind of bad?
It was difficult at the beginning, I have to admit. We have this is like the second approach of like setting up this, setup of this project, because originally we were doing something similar to Phoenix Live Dashboard, because similar like library to us, I guess. And Oban Pro is a good example too. Yeah, it was difficult. I mean, we had some problems with, actually, after there was a first internal release that's only for projects in our company. It was still using the old way of setup of the library. We gave it to one of our projects, and they were like, it's not working. I mean, the application is not starting, and we decided to change it completely. But yeah, we have some issues with. We had some issues actually, because it should be in past with parsing JavaScript, because we have a lot of custom JavaScript, we have a lot of custom CSSs. We had some issues with it. It was really difficult to wrap it up, but it's working fine now, I guess. Yeah. And the setup is quite good.
Yeah, your approach now is, I'm going to have my own server.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
It was easier this way, basically.
Yeah, I noticed that because you have instructions on there for the constant security policy. So if anyone has that, like those CSP headers running in dev or staging or something where you have LiveDebugger enabled, you do have to like allow this other, because it's on a different port at this point, it has to be this other host. You have to allow these assets from another host to be loaded. It gets to be a thing. Similarly, you know, I noticed that LiveDebugger has Igniter support. So I'm curious from your perspective, how was it to like build in Igniter support? You know, and for the listeners, Igniter is a way to like standardize injecting code into your project. So it's very helpful for like installers, for example, in existing code bases, or even or skeletons code bases. From your perspective, Krzysztof, how was LiveDebugger's support of Igniter? How did that go?
I don't know how difficult it was to create a Igniter extension, because Zach did it actually for us. And he created a pull request and wrote me on Discord, and I was like, well, okay, let's add it.
Yeah, go for it.
And yeah, a big kudos to Zach, because Igniter is really cool. Thanks, Zach.
Yeah. Well, for everyone else out there, it's only about 180 lines long. That's the whole task. So it doesn't look to be all that much. And a lot of that is docs and text. Just raw strings in there. Not even the actual logic to do things. So anyway, it looks like it would have been pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean the code is pretty short, and I have to admit that it's doing a lot of cool stuff. I mean, the whole setup is basically executing a single command in the terminal, so it's really good.
Well, with the time we have left, I do want to come back to what we'd already teased, and is some of the what's coming next. What are you looking for to build? And really, I guess the big question is, you took this contribution from Zach Daniel for doing Igniter support. Are you looking for community contributions here? Or is it like, no, we really have a plan. We know what we're trying to deliver on this next thing. What is it you would like to see?
From our perspective, currently on LiveDebugger, we have a whole team for LiveDebugger. So I'm working on it full time, and there are actually 2 more people, Alan and Hubert, who are working on it part time. And they're doing a really good job, and I'm happy to work with them. But contributors are welcome. We've got all our tasks in GitHub projects, so it's available for everyone. You can see what currently we're working on. Yeah, so contributors are welcome, and we would really like to hear feedback from you guys, from everyone out there who is listening to this podcast and is using a LiveDebugger, because we are doing it for community. If you had any ideas for features, or if you spotted any bugs, feel free to report it via GitHub issue. When it comes to our plans, we will be releasing next minor version, 0.2.0, probably end of this month. Definitely before Elixir Conf in Europe, so maybe the beginning of May. There will be some bigger features that we are planning. So definitely we are planning, as I mentioned before, extension for LiveDebugger for Chrome. The dark mode is coming. And finally, we are planning a more advanced filtering of callback traces. So it's rather simple, but we had to make some refactors to achieve this functionality. But you will be able to filter out some callbacks. So, for example, you want to just see only handle events. You will be able to do it by filtering out the rest of them. Hopefully, we'll be able to achieve pattern matching in case of filtering. So you will be actually able to use pattern matching to filter out not needed traces. But it's definitely not in this version.
Interesting. Well, that's really cool. It's interesting that you're spending full time on that too. So that, to me, is showing that Software Mansion says, hey, we think this is an important enough feature for the community. Maybe it's benefiting the company, but they're dedicating your time to actually work on that and push that forward. So I think that's wonderful. And I really appreciate your initiative in making this happen and pushing this forward, because I love it. I'm going to keep using it. And I am really excited about some of the tools and ideas that you've talked about bringing into the future, like, editable state. Woohoo.
Yes.
If people want to get in touch with you or follow you online, where should they go to do that?
I'm on Elixir Lang Slack. I think it will be the best way probably. But when it comes to official news about LiveDebugger, I encourage you to follow Software Mansion accounts on Twitter and Blue Sky. Yeah, probably also blog of Software Mention on Medium is useful to subscribe, because we will be creating some more blog posts about LiveDebugger soon. These are like the main channels. Also, I sometimes post on Reddit, Elixir Reddit.
Yeah, I should mention that we have a link in the show notes to the blog post. It's fairly recent, the end of March. That's Introduction to LiveDebugger, walking you through how the different pieces work and what they can help you do in your application. Great resource. Well, thank you, Krzysztof, for coming on and talking about what you've been working on and sharing that. At some point, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this just becomes part of a standard install. Maybe it becomes part of Phoenix. Maybe not. Maybe it's like React DevTools and it stays its own separate thing, but it's like the thing that everyone always sticks into their application because it's just so darn helpful. Well, thank you again. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.